Absolutely. Thank you so much for your time. Looking back, September 11th was really transformative for this country, very visibly for many people in many different ways. Some things were really unseen, and that was something that happened at the state attorney's office here in Brevard County at that time. And after September 11th, we actually lost funding to the program that I was currently a case manager for. And that was a program called Project Payback that worked with juvenile defendants to get them jobs to pay back restitution to their victims. From there, unbeknownst to me at the time, I had no real intentions to be a lawyer at that time, but I then became a victim advocate because of the loss of funding in that program. And while I was serving as a victim advocate, that's when I really got to watch lawyers do the work of lawyering. I found myself in the courtroom really wanting to ask questions, wanting to make arguments, and so as a result, when FAMU built a law school in Orlando, State Attorney Norman Wolfinger at the time said, "What are you doing? I think you should go to law school and come back as a prosecutor," and so I did. So in 2007, I came back to the State Attorney's office, did everything from misdemeanor to repeat domestic violence offenders, worked as a felony trial attorney, was about to take a job, had been offered a job with the statewide prosecutor's office in Orlando when Norman Wolfinger said, "Please don't leave. How about I let you start a division?" And that was the Elderly Economic Crimes Unit. So that was in 2011. I ran that unit from 2011 to 2016. Learned a tremendous amount about other areas of the law during that, as you can imagine, through criminal prosecution of elder-related cases, learned about probate, learned about guardianships, wills, trust, powers of attorneys. So from there, I was promoted to a felony trial division chief in 2016. Actually, coincidentally, Judge Nancy Maloney's division at the time. Did that for 3 years and was called by the sheriff, who did not have general counsel, did not have a legal services unit, and called to say, "Hey, I think I want to add an attorney to the sheriff's office. It's a staff of about 1,700 people. Would you come?" And that was about the time that I knew ultimately I wanted to sit here before you and ultimately seek a judgeship. I knew at that time I really had only practiced in the criminal arena, although some of the other types of areas of law touched upon my cases as a prosecutor. And so I wanted that civil experience. I wanted to learn as much as I could about civil law. I've been there since 2019, July of 2019, and so a little over 5 years. So learning everything from contracts to professional liability, complex litigation, risk protection orders, many of the things that they do in circuit civil court. So I stand before you now, happy to answer your questions. Why I'm here is certainly I respect the fact that our judiciary needs to be learned, needs to know the rules of evidence, needs to know the rules of procedure, people who will do the homework to learn the cases that are appearing before them. I am that person. If I don't know it, I'm going to learn it. You can plug me in anywhere in any division. I feel confident that at this time, I've been a practicing attorney for 17 years and really wanted to be able to appear before you when I knew I had seen enough to be able to feel confident that I would make a tremendous addition to the bench. So happy to answer your questions.
You have one of the best resumes we've seen, or I've seen in a long time for this job. I consider it a federal level resume. On the federal JNC, I would not be surprised to see this quality resume. I'm concerned that you're going to go from a job that you love and that you're really good at to one that you may not like as much. Being a chief legal officer for a large agency is an intoxicating job.
Thank you very much, firstly. I certainly appreciate that sentiment. You're not the first person who has said that. I really, one of the things that I love so much about what I do right now is getting to interpret the law for our deputies, for our agency, really tear laws apart textually to tell them whether they have probable cause, don't have probable cause, whether they're about to embark on a constitutional action, not embark on a constitutional than those who sit in public servant capacities because they're really serving the people. And so I appreciate that sentiment, but I certainly have watched judges, the work that they do, value that tremendously, and do believe that those who can serve in that capacity will do well for the community.
There's a concern that I have, even though I just hear your great comment. The concern is, are you in practice for the day-to-day rapid-fire analysis and writing that the circuit judge has to do?
I have been, certainly would be. It is a little different when you are a general counsel. You do jump from topic to topic to topic, different causes of action to other types of events for the day. So I'm not in the courtroom like I was as a prosecutor for sure. Would I dive right back into that day-to-day? Of course. As a division chief for criminal circuit division, that's what I did, was manage the courtroom on a daily basis from the state side, and we were fortunate enough to have judges who really let the state determine what the trial lists look like, what hearings are being called up. So while I've been out of the courtroom for that day-to-day business, I had a hearing yesterday on a risk protection order. So I still am in court, not as much as I was obviously as a state attorney using court all day.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Ms. Moody.
Yeah.
Ms. Moody, what do you consider important qualities in becoming a good circuit judge?
Certainly, people who are timely, people who will rule in a timely fashion, rights are at stake, remedies are requested, and justice really needs to be done swiftly. So I've always appreciated judges who will rule timely, judges who understand the rules of evidence. Number one, critically important. I have seen cases end in ways that I would not see justice having done because of a lack of an understanding of the rules of evidence. So certainly someone who's going to listen when they'd like to speak. People who will give everybody an opportunity to be heard. I have seen times when people aren't able to make a record that they should be entitled to make a record. So just people who will do the homework if it's a case they are not incredibly familiar with, or a topic they're not incredibly familiar with, but they'll do homework before they get to court. That includes the judges, not just the attorneys, so that they're prepared to appropriately rule. So I just think people who will give every side a fair opportunity to be heard and will diligently strive for the best possible ruling and outcome. I always, as a prosecutor, strive not to get reversed by the appellate court. I think that's important for judges, too, to really strive to rule properly in accordance with the law so as not to be reversed on their opinions. So really just learned, listen, humble, timely. Those are the qualities that I look for.
Thank you.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I just wanted to follow up on something you just said, about when people are not able to make a record and having the opportunity to do so. Just to make sure I understood you correctly, what did you mean by that, and how would you envision that playing out?
I have witnessed judges who already know how they're going to rule in there, and they've already heard enough, they know how they're going to rule, and they would cut parties off. I just think that appellate cases are so critically important. It's really our appellate cases that many times shape the future of law, and so to be able to build a record that is sufficient for an appellate court to make a determination, that's always been something that to me I just think is so critically important. And no matter where a judge sits on a topic, that if the parties believe that they need to add information to the record so that the proper record is preserved on appeal, that they're able to do so. So just allowing everybody the opportunity to be heard, regardless of whether you have already decided in your mind where the case is headed.
Okay, thank you.
Why did you join the Federalist Society?
So I sit on the Eastern Florida State College chairman is Ron House. When we were having a conversation, probably, I want to say about 6 months to a year ago, he asked if I was a member. I said no. He said, why not? I said, I really don't know. And so he recommended that I join. I had also talked to a few judges who are current sitting judges who are in fact members who talked about it as well. So I started researching the organization, saw the vast amount of topics that they produce on a weekly basis, of seminars and webinars and meetings that with really interesting topics and speakers, and so I joined.
How is your judicial philosophy your own and not that simply of the Federalist Society?
Well, firstly, I haven't been a member long enough for it probably to be necessarily reflective of that organization. Does it differ? Not a tremendous amount. I certainly, if you listen to Neil Gorsuch and his belief on, the judicial philosophies, I think you probably, by kind of where I come from, I tear apart statutes, look for commas, look for clauses in the statute. I certainly agree and believe wholeheartedly that the legislative body is a number of people that have come together to either pass or strike down laws, whereas judges are literally one individual that is interpreting that law. And so how the law ends up on paper in black and white is really critically important to me. That's how I have prosecuted cases from the beginning of my career, is how I interpret laws for the sheriff's office and the sheriff as it stands, is what actually was passed and codified and put into paper, and what do those words specifically mean. So certainly a very textualist. I've been that way from long before anybody ever mentioned joining the Federalist Society. That's truly how I have always operated. Because as an attorney, every job I've had as an attorney, I've sworn an oath to uphold the Constitution. I have not been in private practice where I represented an individual person and maybe their financial interests. I have always represented entities that were the government. And so for me, that's really how I have practiced law, and that would continue on.
Thank you.
Hey, Ms. Moody.
Hi, how are you?
Just tell us a little bit about your time with the Sheriff's Office, and how do you think that experience or experiences, will that make you a better judge, or how that will affect your ability to kind of get moving as a circuit court judge?
Yeah, definitely. So interesting that there was no legal services unit when I came. There was no general counsel to learn from. It was just me. I arrived, they showed me to my desk, gave me a computer. Nobody else on staff was a lawyer, so they said go. And so through that, I had to grow a legal services unit, traveled around to see how other circuits, other counties do things, how other sheriff's offices do things. I originally went for that civil experience. I knew I would be doing asset forfeiture cases. I knew I'd be litigating those protection orders. I knew I'd be litigating injunctive relief, public records disputes, and those things. That's what I knew I was going for. What I did not know, and anybody who has been a general counsel can certainly appreciate, is once you're the lawyer on staff, you will be confronted with every possible issue. So that has evolved into contracts. I do a tremendous amount of contract work. I do a tremendous amount of training, policy writing. So I ended up much more in the administrative side of the sheriff's office than I originally had anticipated. And from that, understanding how to run a division, understanding the administration of a governmental entity. We run the jail, we run animal services, we run a lot of administrative bodies that people don't necessarily think of. When you think of the sheriff's office, you're thinking of criminal cases. Much of what I do is administrative, which certainly translates well to a judicial position. I also work just very well independently. I started the Elder and Economic Crimes Unit with no predecessor, ran that for 5 years, grew it, didn't know a single thing about anything about elder law when I started that unit either. So both of those opportunities have given me a chance to just create divisions learn, and I really function very well independently, which I think is critically important for the judiciary. I don't think I've added that when Mr. Dowdy asked that question, but just really without the necessary popular political pressures of the day, I tend to be very independent. It also, I will say, has given me the opportunity to really argue and strike down a lot of things that the sheriff's office may want to do that I say you can't do that, it's unconstitutional. So really just having already been in that practice of telling the agency when the law doesn't support a certain action, I think is incredibly translatable to the judiciary.
The last thing you just touched on is something that's rolling around in my head, because the overarching issue that I wanted to address is, well, you're a criminal defense attorney or a criminal defendant. Does this look like the fox guarding that house? Now you have somebody signing search warrants. They used to have search warrants or say, yes, this is something you can get a warrant on. And so to that end, my thought was to ask you something about how much you push back on the sheriff's office when they're asking you to do things, but I'm sensitive that many of those things probably can't talk about specifically. So can you give us can you address that without going into things that you probably can't?
Yes, absolutely. So the first thing I think is very important for the commission to know, and anybody who were to later inquire about this, is I'm here of my own volition, number one. If the sheriff had an option of where I would be right now, I'd probably be working. He would probably rather me be at my desk right now.
That's what I heard.
It's not a problem.
Okay.
Sir.
Okay, so I think that's really important for the public to know, because there, in the past there has been this thought that did somebody ask Moody to go run or not. So I applied on my own. This has been me in the works for a good period of time. Really importantly, to answer the question though, is that I am not one to shy away from saying no. I'll say no nicely. But I will say no, and I will tell you when I think things are wrong. And so as I said before, every position I've held as an attorney has sworn an oath to uphold the Constitution. I have taken that very seriously. When I was a prosecutor, I am probably the only prosecutor I have ever heard of. I actually asked a judge to enter a judgment of acquittal, which probably equals malpractice if you were a private practitioner. But I knew the state had not presented it. We had no other evidence, and the evidence we had presented at that point in the proceeding did not prove a prima facie case. And so I cling to that. I have worked very diligently that if we learn evidence that a person is not guilty, or we learn that a different person may be the suspect and somebody's been wrongfully arrested, I am the first person calling a judge to get a person released from custody. I have really strived in my whole career to do what's right and just, no matter whose side that favored. I recognize that to be a prevailing party doesn't always necessarily mean that you're going to win. It means you might have prevailed in a legal matter, but the real damage can still be caused by injustices within the court system. So anybody who knows me, who's ever practiced with me, against me, I hope would tell you that I exercise fundamentally fair. I never want to see somebody wrongfully incarcerated. I will never advocate for a search warrant that does not have sufficient probable cause. That's who I am to my core. My father was in the Air Force. I come from the military. I knew I was going to be a public servant my entire life. And to me, that means that sometimes justice looks very different. And for me, it's never been zealous advocacy just because of who my client was. I have really always strived to really advocate for the people as a whole. So I can appreciate the concern there, but I'm probably the only candidate you'll have talked to today who actually gets the opportunity to tell the sheriff no for a lot of times. So to that end, and I'm not afraid to do it, and I certainly would not be on the bench if there's no probable cause for warrants. There's no probable cause for warrants, and I have that conversation already on a daily, not a daily basis, but many times.
questions for me, I'm okay.
There have been multiple openings in recent years. Why did you wait until that?
So I really felt like I needed 5 years of civil experience before I was going to come take your valuable time to sit in the afternoon and chat about it. So when I left the state attorney's office, I had 12 years of criminal experience. I really thought 5 years of civil experience was important. I wanted to be a candidate that the chief judge, or if the governor were to appoint me, that the chief judge can put me in any division at any time, ready to go, have to learn things, obviously. Each case is different, these are different facts and different circumstances, but I just thought that was critically important. I contemplated applying even as far back as when Judge Peacock was appointed. I had only been with the sheriff's office, I think about 6 months to a year at that point in time, and I really wanted to learn more. I had not had the opportunity to sit in on a lot of civil cases, civil trials, and federal trials where we are the defendant in those cases. And I just thought that was critically important before I asked you to recommend me to the governor's office.
At what point in your legal career did you first have the seeds of wanting to be a judge?
Very early on as a prosecutor. It probably solidified when I tried a murder case wherein a hearsay ruling caused an acquittal. That was really probably the moment that I was definitively going to ultimately one day either run for judge or come before the commission and ask to be recommended to the governor's office. But probably early on, when I was doing the domestic violence repeat offenders, I had the opportunity to travel to each division. Also, when I did the elder and economic crime prosecutions, I had the opportunity to travel to each division. So I really got to watch a lot of judges simultaneously through those years of my career, and really pretty early on knew that this is where I wanted to ultimately end up in my career, and regardless of whether I gave up a very enjoyable job to do so.
Any
Ran
closing,
for state attorney.
We're interested.
any closing remarks?
I just want to thank you so much for your time. The work that you all do, it's a difficult job. Certainly, I want you to know that if you recommend me to the governor's office, I will not let you down. I have been appointed by the governor to the Eastern Florida State College trustees, so I have been in an appointment type of position with the governor's office before. Just have had such an excellent opportunity to really try to diversify my profile as a lawyer, travel around, really watch what works for judges, watch what works for lawyers, and you really just think it's critically important that the people who come to the courthouse across the street on a day-to-day basis just have that knowledge and belief and confidence that the person hearing their case is truly going to listen, truly going to take the arguments,